The Pool of Shikama, Book 3 in the Tales of Tonogato series by Cynthia Radthorne. Although it was as yet only dusk, here in the mountains the dark seemed to settle in sooner than in other places of Tonogato. The day's light lingered briefly, reflecting off the snow crystals that blanketed the ground like a sheet of purest white satin. Soon even that modest illumination fled, as the blue sky overhead faded to dull gray. Wisps of snow swirled in the cold mountain air. Along a trail barely discernible amongst the rocks appeared a solitary rider. Horse and traveler alike moved with a definite air of purpose, for certainly no casual passerby would be venturing on this trail so high in the mountains. There was no habitation anywhere along its length, the rider had been told, until it ended at a great chasm well up among the peaks. It was there, at its unlikely terminus, that one might find shelter at the monastery of Bakura, home to a band of scholarly monks. It was not a road traveled lightly, particularly this close to nightfall. Anyone passing this way came with intent. Adorned with sturdy travel clothing, head wrapped securely against the mountain cold, the rider urged the horse onwards. Both were tired, for neither had benefited from a single break on the journey up into the hills. Eddies of wind tossed snowflakes into the rider's eyes, where they were swept away in irritation. At that moment a sound caused the rider's head to lift. The origin of the sound was not readily apparent, as the rider scanned all around, frustration evident in the way the reins were jerked about. The duo continued on, until finally rounding a bend in the trail, where the rider reined the horse to a stop. Not far distant stood two massive stones jetting up into the sky taller than a man's head. They were set close to the edge of a cliff, overlooking a chasm that brought an end to the trail. A rope bridge was suspended from the near side via the two stones, reaching out across the vast empty space toward a wall built from enormous rocks. Steep roofs peeked up from behind the wall, stretching away into a gloom beyond which the rider could not see. The origin of the sound became evident, however, row upon row of wind chimes mounted atop the stones of the surrounding wall. The wind blew the chimes about, filling the chasm and the small clearing at the cliff edge with lavish, harmonious sound. The rider shifted in the saddle, rearranging some of the load atop the horse. The sword, carefully wrapped in a blanket, was tucked even more securely out of view. After giving it a reassuring tug in its hiding place, the rider urged the horse across the bridge to Bakura. Within the walls of the monastery, in a chamber situated well beneath the snow-covered ground, a man sat hunched over a desk. The room was not very large, the walls, the roof, and the floor, all made from the same slate stone as the neighboring hills, carefully fitted and smoothed by generations of inhabitants. Light was provided by candles mounted in sturdy sconces set high on the otherwise bare walls. There was very little sound within the chamber, only the scritch, scritch, scritch of a quill pen wielded by the room's occupier as he wrote upon a sheet of parchment. The man looked up, pondering his next words, tapping the quill against his forehead. His black hair, streaked now with gray all the way down the length of his queue, was tied at the back of his neck. Draped loosely about him was the dark brown robe of a brother of Bakura, bound with a simple rope sash. His features spoke of someone used to laboring over parchments. A delicate web of wrinkles surrounded his eyes, the result of squinting for endless hours in dim light. His fingers were stained with ink, another casualty of a prodigious pen. The gaze, staring off into nothingness as he considered his statements, was nevertheless fixed and steady, unwavering on the same point of wall opposite him, until he had organized his thoughts completely. Only then did he tilt his head down and move his hand to resume writing. His concentration must have wavered momentarily, for as he brought his hand back to the parchment, he brushed the saucer of ink, tipping its contents in a small torrent across the desk. "Blast," he muttered, observing the injury inflicted upon his parchment. Just as he rose to search for something to mop up the mess, there was a knock at the heavy wooden door to the chamber. He frowned. Joshu was well aware that he was working on a treatise and hated to be disturbed. No matter that he had been disturbed anyway, Joshu wouldn't have known that. What could be so urgent for him to intrude? "Enter," he called out crisply. The door opened a crack, and Joshu's homely old face peeked around the door. "Your forgiveness, Abbot, but you have a visitor, a young man who insists on seeing you." Abbot Satora, the brothers of Baccarat, frowned more deeply. "At this hour? How long has he been here?" "Well, he just arrived, actually. He claims he has urgent business with you, said he's a bodyguard for a wealthy merchant, and has been sent to find you. I would have put him off, had him stay the night first and speak with you in the morning, but—" Satora could think of no earthly reason why a merchant would have the slightest interest in him, nor why such a man would send someone all the way up here to seek him out. But it was clear from the agitation in Joshu's voice that something troubled him. "Yes?" The old man, his hair the merest fringe peeking over the tops of his ears, looked uneasily back down the length of the hallway, then slipped inside the door, half closing it behind him. He whispered, "He said he had heard you were a healer. His master is very ill, he says, and needs immediate attention." Upon hearing the word healer, Satora's blood ran cold. Only a handful of people in all of Tonogato were aware that he was the son of a former Zaitan magician, and even fewer knew that he had inherited her healing skills, magic that he had locked away within himself, never to be touched again. Suddenly feeling as if an immense pressure was squeezing against his sides, Satora bade Joshu to close the door. "What else did this young man say? Tell me exactly."